The morning was quiet. A cool wind moved through the tall grass. Hundreds of warriors stood in silence. Each one carried a large cowhide shield. Each one held a short spear made for fighting at close range. Across the open field, another army waited. The young warrior at the front of our story could hear his own heartbeat. This would be his first battle. His hands trembled. His mouth was dry. He looked toward the man leading them. There stood Shaka. Calm. Silent. Watching. He did not shout. He did not rush. He simply studied the land before him. Then he raised his spear. The warriors answered with one powerful voice. The ground shook as they charged forward. Years later, that young warrior would tell his grandchildren. People say Shaka was fearless. But I remember something different. I remember how he made ordinary men believe they could do extraordinary things. I remember how a small people became a great nation. And I remember the day I understood that history can change because of one person. That man was Shaka Zulu. Today, many people remember him as one of Africa's greatest warriors. Some remember him as a king. Others remember him as a military genius. But before he became any of those things, he was a boy. A boy who was not expected to become king. A boy who grew up facing rejection and hardship. A boy who refused to let his past decide his future. No one could have imagined that this young boy would one day build one of the most powerful kingdoms in southern Africa. No one could have imagined that his ideas would change the way wars were fought. And no one could have imagined that, more than 200 years later, people around the world would still be telling his story. Welcome to the African Archive, where we bring Africa's history to life through careful research and powerful storytelling. If you enjoy discovering the remarkable people, kingdoms, and civilizations that shaped our world, subscribe and join us on this journey through Africa's past. This is the story of Shaka Zulu, the warrior who built a nation. Chapter 1. The boy nobody expected. Long before Shaka became a king. Long before armies marched at his command. He was simply a boy trying to find his place in the world. Shaka was born around 1787 in what is now KwaZulu-Natal, a province on the east coast of South Africa. At that time, there was no country called South Africa. Instead, the land was home to many African communities, each led by its own chief. One of those communities was the Zulu. The Zulu were not yet a great kingdom. They were a small chiefdom, known mainly by their neighbors. No one imagined they would one day become one of the most powerful kingdoms in southern Africa. Shaka's father was Senzangakona, the chief of the Zulu people. His mother was Nondi. According to Zulu tradition, Shaka's parents were not married in the usual way expected at the time. Because of this, Shaka and his mother faced rejection. Many people looked down on them. Some questioned whether Shaka truly belonged. For a young boy, those wounds were painful. Our young storyteller was about the same age as Shaka. He often saw Nondi walking through the village with her son. Some people greeted them kindly. Others whispered behind their backs. The young boy did not fully understand why. He only knew that Shaka never forgot the way people treated his mother. As the years passed, Nondi and Shaka left the Zulu community and lived among other groups. Life was not easy. Some days there was little food. Some days they had to depend on the kindness of others. But hardship became Shaka's greatest teacher. It taught him patience. It taught him endurance. And it taught him never to give up. Even as a boy, Shaka stood out. He was strong, quick, and full of determination. He enjoyed caring for cattle, as many boys did, but he was also a careful observer. He watched how older warriors trained. He noticed how chiefs earned respect. He listened more than he spoke. The young storyteller remembered seeing Shaka practicing with a stick long after the other boys had gone home. While others played, Shaka trained. While others rested, Shaka pushed himself harder. It was as if he believed his future depended on every lesson he learned. Years later, people would call him a military genius. But greatness did not begin on a battlefield. It began in those quiet moments when no one was watching. As Shaka grew into a young man, his courage and determination became impossible to ignore. Soon, an opportunity would come that would change his life forever. He would leave behind the struggles of his childhood and begin the journey that would transform him from an ordinary young man into one of Africa's greatest leaders. Chapter 2. Learning to become a warrior. As Shaka grew older, he left his childhood behind. He joined the army of the Mfecane, a larger and more powerful kingdom that lived near the Zulu. The Mfecane were led by a respected chief named Dingiswayo. Dingiswayo believed that a strong army needed more than brave men. It needed discipline, training, and leaders who could think clearly in the middle of a battle. The young storyteller also joined the army. Like every new recruit, he trained from sunrise until sunset. The days were long. The training was hard. The older warriors expected the younger men to become stronger every day. Many recruits complained. Some gave up. But not Shaka. He trained harder than anyone else. He ran farther. He practiced longer. He refused to accept defeat. The young storyteller watched with amazement. Whenever the training ended, Shaka stayed behind. He practiced again and again until every movement became natural. Dingiswayo noticed. He saw that Shaka was not only brave. He was also a careful thinker. He learned quickly. He stayed calm under pressure. And he inspired confidence in the warriors around him. Before long, Shaka was trusted to lead small groups of soldiers. His men followed him willingly because they knew he would never ask them to do something he would not do himself. The young storyteller remembered one difficult journey through heavy rain. The soldiers were cold, hungry, and exhausted. Some wanted to stop. But Shaka kept walking beside them. He carried the same shield. He ate the same food. He slept on the same ground. That was the moment many soldiers decided they would follow him anywhere. Then, everything changed. Shaka's father, Senzangakona, died. Not long afterwards, with Dingiswayo's support, Shaka became the new leader of the Zulu people. He was not taking over a great kingdom. He was becoming the chief of a small community that many larger groups barely noticed. The young storyteller looked around at the people gathered to welcome their new leader. No one knew what the future would bring. Could this young chief protect his people? Could he make the Zulu stronger? Could he unite communities that had spent years living apart? Shaka believed he could. But he also knew that belief alone was not enough. If the Zulu were going to survive, everything would have to change. And the first place he would begin was with the army. Chapter 3. Building a kingdom. When Shaka became leader of the Zulu people, he knew that a small chiefdom could not survive by doing things the old way. If the Zulu were going to become stronger, they needed a stronger army. But Shaka believed that strength was not just about having more warriors. It was about having better trained warriors. The young storyteller soon discovered that life in the army had changed. Training became harder than ever before. The warriors ran long distances every day. They learned to move quickly across rough ground. They trained together until they could fight as one. There was no room for laziness. No room for carelessness. Every warrior depended on the man standing beside him. Shaka also introduced a different kind of spear. Instead of using a long spear that was mainly thrown from a distance, his warriors carried a shorter spear called the Ihlwa. The Ihlwa was made for close fighting. It meant warriors had to be brave enough to stand face to face with their enemy. They also carried large shields made from cowhide. The shields protected them while helping them move close enough to fight. The young storyteller was frightened the first time he entered a battle. His heart pounded. His hands shook. Then he heard Shaka's voice. "Stand together." Those words stayed with him. The warriors were taught that they would succeed only if they trusted one another. Shaka also organized his soldiers into groups based on their age. These groups were called Amabuto. The Amabuto lived, trained, and fought together. Over time, they became more like brothers than ordinary soldiers. Their loyalty was not only to Shaka. It was also to one another. As the army grew stronger, so did the Zulu Kingdom. Some neighboring communities chose to join Shaka because they believed they would be safer together. Others fought against him and were defeated. Many of those who surrendered became part of the growing kingdom instead of being driven away. The young storyteller noticed something changing. Villages that had once seen themselves as separate people were beginning to think of themselves as one nation. The Zulu Kingdom was becoming larger, stronger, more organized. News of Shaka spread across southern Africa. Some leaders admired him. Others feared him. They knew he was building something they had never seen before. But as the kingdom grew, so did the challenges. This was a time when many communities across southern Africa were moving, competing for land and resources, and fighting for survival. Some of these changes were linked to Shaka's wars. Others were caused by drought, hunger, local rivalries, and the actions of many different leaders. It was a complicated time in history. The young storyteller did not understand all the reasons. He only knew that the world around him was changing faster than anyone could have imagined. Shaka had built a powerful kingdom. But building a kingdom was only the beginning. Keeping it together would prove to be an even greater challenge. Chapter 4. The Weight of Power. The Zulu Kingdom continued to grow. Every year, more people came under Shaka's rule. New villages became part of the kingdom. The army became larger. The name Shaka spread across southern Africa. Some people spoke it with admiration. Others spoke it with fear. The young storyteller had now become an experienced warrior. He had fought beside men from many different communities. Some had once been enemies. Now they stood together, protecting the same kingdom. For the first time, he felt that the Zulu were becoming more than a collection of villages. They were becoming one nation. But leading a growing kingdom was not easy. Every day, Shaka had decisions to make. Where should the army go next? How should the kingdom be protected? How should disputes between communities be settled? The greater the kingdom became, the greater the responsibility resting on one man's shoulders. Shaka demanded discipline from everyone. Warriors had to obey orders immediately. Cowardice was not accepted. Neither was dishonesty. He believed that if discipline failed, the kingdom itself could fall. Many respected him for this. Others feared him. The young storyteller admired his king. He had seen Shaka lead from the front. He had seen him share the hardships of his soldiers. But he also noticed something changing. The king smiled less often. He spent more time alone. The burden of leadership seemed heavier than ever. Then tragedy struck. Shaka's mother, Nondi, died. Her death deeply affected him. She had stood by him when many others rejected him. She had believed in him before anyone else did. Losing her was a terrible blow. Some historical accounts say that after Nondi's death, Shaka's grief became overwhelming. They describe him making harsh decisions and demanding strict period of mourning throughout the kingdom. Other historians believe that some of these stories may have been exaggerated over time. What is clear is that this was a difficult period for both Shaka and the Zulu Kingdom. The young storyteller remembered the sadness that spread across the land. The songs became quieter. The celebration stopped. Even the strongest warriors lowered their heads. For the first time, he wondered if grief could change even the strongest leader. As the months passed, fear began to grow inside the royal family. Some of Shaka's closest relatives believed the kingdom could not continue this way. Whispers began to spread. Private conversations took place behind closed doors. The young storyteller sensed that something was wrong. An enemy was coming. But this time, the danger would not come from outside the kingdom. It would come from within Shaka's own family. And it would change the history of the Zulu people forever. Chapter 5. The King's Final Days. The whispers grew louder. At first, only a few people noticed them. Then more voices joined in. Some leaders believed the kingdom needed a new direction. Others feared that no one was safe if they questioned the king. The young storyteller could feel the tension. The army was still strong. The kingdom was still powerful. But something had changed. The greatest danger was no longer outside the kingdom. It was inside it. Shaka did not believe his own family would betray him. He had defeated powerful enemies. He had united many communities. He had built a kingdom that few people thought was possible. But even the strongest king cannot always see danger when it comes from those closest to him. Among those who turned against him were his half-brothers, Dingaan and Mangona. They believed the time had come to remove Shaka from power. They found support from a trusted advisor named Bopa. Together, they waited for the right moment. Then, in 1828, that moment came. One day, while Shaka was at his royal home, the three men attacked him. The young storyteller was nearby when the news spread. At first, no one believed it. Shaka has been killed. The words seemed impossible. How could the man who had defeated so many enemies fall inside his own home? But it was true. The great king was dead. The kingdom fell silent. Some people wept. Others stood in shock. Many wondered what would happen next. Dingaan became the new king. The young storyteller walked through the royal village one last time. He remembered the first day he had seen Shaka standing before the army. He remembered the long marches, the hard training, the victories, the courage that had inspired thousands of ordinary men. Now, that chapter had ended. Shaka's life had lasted only about 40 years. Yet in that short time, he had changed the history of Southern Africa. His kingdom would continue. His army would continue. But the man who had built them was gone. As the young storyteller looked toward the hills where he had trained as a boy, he realized something. A king can build a nation. But once he is gone, it is the people who must carry his legacy forward. In our final chapter, we'll discover why Shaka Zulu is still remembered more than 200 years after his death. And why historians continue to debate the life of the man who built a nation. Chapter 6. The king who built a nation. Shaka was gone. But the kingdom he built remained. His half-brother, Dingaan, became the new king of the Zulu Kingdom. The young storyteller watched as life slowly returned to normal. Children laughed again. Farmers returned to their fields. Warriors continued their training. The kingdom moved forward. But no one forgot the man who had changed it forever. Years passed. The young storyteller became an old man. His shield was no longer carried into battle. His spear rested quietly inside his home. Now, his greatest duty was not to fight. It was to remember. His grandchildren often gathered around him. "Grandfather," they would ask, "were you really one of Shaka's warriors?" He would smile. "Yes." Then they would ask the question he had more than any other. What was Shaka really like? The old man would pause before answering. He was brave. He expected the best from everyone. He believed that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things if they stood together. He was not a perfect man. He made decisions that are still debated today. But without him, there would have been no great Zulu kingdom. That was the truth he wanted them to understand. History is really simple. Some people remember Shaka as a hero who united his people and built a powerful nation. Others remember the suffering and conflict that marked parts of his reign. Historians continue to study his life because it cannot be explained with a single word. What no one can deny is this: Shaka changed Southern Africa. He transformed a small chiefdom into a powerful kingdom. He introduced military ideas that influenced generations of Zulu warriors. He built a sense of unity that outlived him. More than 50 years after his death, the Zulu Kingdom was still strong enough to defeat a modern British army at the Battle of Isanwena in 1879. That victory belonged to another generation. But it grew from the kingdom Shaka had built. Today, people from around the world continue to visit places connected to his life. His story is taught in schools. It is studied by historians. It is remembered in songs, books, and documentaries. Not because he never failed, but because he changed history. The old storyteller looked across the hills one final time. He remembered the frightened boy who had joined the army. He remembered the king who had taught ordinary men to believe in themselves. He remembered the nation they built together. Thank you for joining us on the African Archive as we explore the remarkable life of Shaka Zulu. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the African Archive and turn on notifications. Together, we'll continue uncovering the people, kingdoms, and civilizations that shaped Africa and helped shape the world. Because history does not remember only those who inherit greatness. It also remembers those who create it. And few leaders transform their people as completely as Shaka Zulu.